Hello and welcome to another Unity tutorial on how to code a game like Minecraft in Unity. Funnily enough, this one is going to be on making an inventory system. For now, it's just going to be the framework of the inventory system, so basically for the creative mode. We're not going to go into things like containers and an actual player inventory yet, because it's a bit pointless when we haven't got items we can drop and pick up and so on. Basically, we're just going to go over drag and droppable items, a creative menu so you can pull up a window that will have all the blocks that we currently have, and we'll get this toolbar working properly so it's not just preset at load time, you can actually put items in and out of it. So let's get into it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go into our world script, and we need to introduce a bool to distinguish between whether we are in or out of the UI. So nice and simple, just a public bool, and we'll call it in UI. It's going to equal false. Actually, we're going to make this a private bool, and we'll make it an underscore, because what we're going to do is we're going to have a public bool, which we will put somewhere down near the bottom. Nice and out of the way. We'll go here. It doesn't really matter. Public bool, and this one will be called in UI. And this one's going to be a get set bool. So for the get, we're just going to return in UI. For the set, however, first off, we will set in UI equals value, and then anything else we want to happen when we set and unset the in UI bool, we will put in here. So for now, we haven't got anything to put in here, but we will have eventually. So if we go into our player script, we need to change this so that it doesn't do anything if we are in the UI. We don't want to be moving the player around, and we don't want to be placing cursor blocks or anything like that if we're in the UI. So that easily enough, we just do world dot in UI, if not in UI, then we can execute all our player code. And then what we will also do is we will grab a reference in here. For now, we're just going to use a simple I key. You can set this to whatever you want. You can set it as a button using the proper Unity input control menu, which you probably should do. This is more about learning how to do the inventory system, not how to properly set your keys in Unity. Maybe that's something I could do another video on, but for now, we're just going to use the I key. So if input.getKeyDown keycode.I, and like I say, you can, the I is completely arbitrary. You can use whatever key you want. I know personally I prefer to use tab for inventory, but whatever it is that you prefer. So if input get key down keycode.I, and then in here all we're going to do is world.inui equals not world.inui. So basically whatever the world.inui is currently set to, this will set it to the opposite. So if we go back in here, we'll just do a quick test. Right now I can move around and look around. You're going to have to trust me on this that it's working, because you can't really see a visual cue. But if I press I now, I can no longer move around. I am pressing the keys there. And then if I press I again, we can move around again. Now there is a slight problem with this, with the way we've got our movement set up. That if I press I while moving, we keep moving. Right now we're technically in the inventory system, but the motion is still set. And the reason for that is because we have our actual movement code up here in fixed update. So we need to do the exact same thing up here. We'll just enclose all of this in an if not world.inui. And then that should, if we run it now, should fix our problems. Yeah, as you can see, we stopped dead. So now to get into the actual meat, I guess you call it, of this. So we're going to create a new script, and we'll call this item stack. And it's very simple. We'll get rid of all this. Item stack is not going to be mono behavior, and all it's going to hold is a public byte ID, which is the ID of the block it holds, and a public int amount. And that is for the amount in this item stack. And that is all that's going to hold. Nice and simple. And then we're going to create another new script, and we're going to call this one UI item slot. And this is where a lot of the work is going to get done. So basically the way we're going to do the inventory system, forget the concept of containers and backpacks, whatever you want to call them, chests, anything like that. Just focus on the individual slots. The slot itself, the single item slot, so like these toolbar slots here, that's where all the magic will happen. As far as containers go, the container is just going to be a collection of these slots. The slots are going to be what actually handles everything. Let's get our UI item slot on the go first. Close all this, get rid of all that, sorry. We need a public bool called isLinked, which will be false by default. All of this will become clear as we get on with it. We need a public item slot. Now, if you remember, we created item slot in the toolbar episode. We're going to be changing that class quite drastically, but we'll get to that. So public item slot, which we will just call item slot, a public image, and to get hold of the image, we're going to need to bring in unity.ui, and the public image we're just going to call slot image, and then another public image which will be called slot icon, and then a public text. I know some of you have mentioned bringing in Text Mesh Pro. It's really not that important. It makes text look slightly better. As I've mentioned before, it's caused problems with this project when I upgraded from, I think, 2018 to 2019 or something. If you want to use Text Mesh Pro, it's really not that big a deal to just import it and switch out. You'd be using, instead of text like I'm about to use here, you'd put text, I think it's Mesh Pro GUI or something like that, and then you just use it exactly the same way that we're going to use this text. So that's entirely up to you if you want to use that. For the sake of simplicity, I'm not going to do it in this. So this is going to be slot amount. Now we need a public bool, which we're going to call has item. And this is going to be entirely a get set. We'll just get, actually, it's read only. So get, and then we're going to say if item slot is equal to null, return false, else, and for now we're just going to return true. Now that's not the way this is going to work. We do actually need to return something from the item slot. However, we haven't done the item slot code yet, so we can't return that yet. So in fact, you know what, let's do the item slot code now, because there's not much to the item slot code, but we do need to fix it. If we go back to Unity, where's our toolbar? See, our toolbar is going to essentially be completely scrapped by the time we finish this video. So, you know, let's just delete the toolbar entirely. And then our item slot code, we're going to put down here now. Public class item slot. Now this one is not going to be a mono behavior, and we're going to have a few things that we need in here. First one is going to be the item stack that we created. And then we also need a reference to a UI item slot, which is what we're creating up here. We'll just call that UI item slot equals null. Both of these will equal null by default. And then we'll have a constructor, so we can create one of these of this item slot class. And this one will take in UI item slot. I think that is all we need for it. Basically, we're just going to create this one constructor for now, because unlike most videos that I do, unlike all the videos that I've done, I haven't worked this video out in advance, so I'm kind of winging it here. So if we need more constructors as we go along, we'll create them as we go along. I'm not going to try and anticipate everything we're going to need, but I think this might be all for now. So we can pass in a UI item slot. Stack will equal null. The UI item slot will equal UI item slot underscore UI item slot. And then we will need something else in here, but we'll add it in a second because we need to create the actual function. So the function is going to be called link. Public void link UI slot. UI item, it will take in a UI item slot. We're just going to call it UI slot. And all it will do is set UI item slot to that. And then we're going to have the opposite of that, which is unlink. And then that one, as you may have already guessed, just sets this to null. we also need a, like we do in the UI item slot class, we need a public bool has item. Again, read only, so we only need one get, no set. And this is going to be if stack does not equal null, return true, else return false. So basically, the item stack, as you know, is just holding a particular item ID and an amount of that item. This is holding a stack. So rather than each slot having a specific amount saying how many of whatever item it's holding is there, that is all stored by the stack, and then the item slot just stores the stack. So up here, we're just going to put, up here, instead of returning true, so this is if item slot is null, then we definitely don't have anything in this item. However, if item slot is not null, we're going to return item slot dot has item. Now, I should probably just take a second to explain what's going on here. Item slot, this class here, is the behind the scenes holder of the particular slot. So whatever items are in this slot will remain in this slot, whether or not you are looking at your inventory or your tool belt or a container or whatever the location of this item slot is, this will still hold the data. This UI item slot is only the visual representation on the actual screen. So this will only be doing anything if you're actually looking at the container or your tool belt or wherever the location of the slot is. So the reason we have that separate is because otherwise we would have to store a UI element for every item that is stored in a slot in the game, which if you've ever played Minecraft, you understand there would be a lot of slots. You only need to get one decent sized storeroom full of double-sized chests, and that's a ridiculous amount of slots. So we store the information here, and then when we need it, this will be attached to a UI element, and it will load the information out of here into here. Hopefully, this is making sense. So the good news is that's there's not a right lot more to do with the actual item slot, but the UI item slot, there is more to do. So we need another function, which is going to be public void link item slot called item slot, and all that's going to do is item slot equals underscore item slot, and we're going to put is linked equals true, and then finally we're going to put item slot dot link UI slot. It's going to link to this, and then in here we need to do the converse. We need to actually link the UI item slot. So UI item slot dot link this. Right, so the next on the agenda is we need an unlink. So item slot dot, okay, for some reason I've called that lock. That obviously should be link. Unlink UI slot, and then UI slot equals null. Now in both of these we need to that should be just item slot. Now in both of these we need to update the actual UI elements, which we're going to do with a function we haven't created yet, but I'll put the reference to it now. Update slot. So if we link or unlink, the first thing we want to do is update the UI elements to show what has happened. Either we've taken an item out of it and there's now nothing in it, or we've added items to it, or so on and so forth. So when we update slot, first we need to make the actual function. Public void update slot. First thing we want to do is if item slot does not equal null and item slot dot has item, then we want to update all the elements. Else we're going to put, we haven't written this function either yet, but we're going to have a clear function to clear the elements. So slot icon dot sprite equals, we haven't actually, have we added? So before we can fill in these details, we do need a reference to world. So world, and then void awake world equals GameObject.find, and we'll look at maybe doing a more optimized way of doing this in the future, but there's not actually going to be that many of these elements, and the ones that we're going to have will all be loaded at the start, so it's only going to slow down the initial loading of the game. And then down here, once we've got our reference to the world, we can set our slot icon dot sprite equals world dot block types. We want our item slot dot, right, okay, we need our stack, which I've made private, and that should have been public, dot stack dot id. And then we want our icon, nice and simple. And then our slot amount dot text equals item slot dot stack dot amount dot to string. And then we want our slot icon dot enabled to equal true. The reason for this is because the icon will show up as a solid color if it doesn't have an image in it. So we're going to be disabling it whenever there isn't an item in the slot. Otherwise we're going to have like a solid square, and we don't want that. We can't turn the transparency down because then we wouldn't be able to see the icon when there is an item there. And then also we want to do the same for slot amount dot enabled equals true. Because we're just going to turn off the amount, by the way, is going to be the little number at the bottom of the inventory slot to show you how many items are currently in there. And then the public void clear is just going to do basically the opposite. So this is going to equal null, this is going to equal nothing, and then we're going to disable both elements. And then just as a little backup, we shouldn't need this because we're going to be the ones writing all the code, but just in case we forget, we're going to have a private void on destroy, and then in here, if item slot does not equal null, item slot dot unlink item slot. And basically all that is if for some reason we destroy an item slot, the actual physical UI element, and it is currently linked, we will unlink it so we don't have an item slot floating around thinking it's got UI elements when it hasn't. And we're just going to add a few more little functions into item slot just to make life a little bit easier. So the first one is going to be public void empty slot, which is fairly straightforward. And in that, we're just going to set stack equals null, and then if UI item slot does not equal null, UI item slot dot update slot. So that just gives us a nice, quick, easy way to update that. Now we're going to need more functions in here, but we'll add them as we're actually going to use them. And I'm sure you're anxious to see something else besides the actual code that I'm writing currently. So let's save this. Item stack, that's pretty much it for item stack. We don't really need to do anything else with that. We've got all this locked off, so let's go back into Unity. Let's just see which error codes we've got from deleting. Oh, good, none. If you remember though, now that we've deleted that, our toolbar no longer works. And that's because we have deleted all the code associated with it. But don't worry, we are going to fix that. So first thing we'll do is go into our canvas. We'll just remove the reference to toolbar because it's not there anymore. And I'm going to delete all of these. I'm going to keep this one. This one is going to be our prefab. So if we go in here and we dig out our UI item slot and drag that onto here. And then in here, we already have our icon image, so we can drag the icon into slot icon. This image, slot image, is this one, the background of the actual slot itself. Thinking about it is completely useless for this tutorial. So slot amount we don't actually have yet. So let's create that. We'll go in here, UI, and we want text. We will use just the Minecraft text that we've been using for everything. For now, we're just going to set it to 999. The color we're going to set to white, and where we're going to put it, we'll just switch to 2D so I can see what I've done with the actual text. There we go. Right, so it doesn't want to be any wider than the actual slot, which I think I set to 50/50, or apparently I set to 24/24. It doesn't want to be any wider than that. 24, 24. We set the, because we're locking it to, oh yeah, let's just lock it to the middle. So position that, and then let's just turn this highlight off for a second so we can see what's going on. And then we want it to be at the bottom. So if we go to our text and we just set it to the bottom, and we'll give it a little bit of a margin. I think not too far. 3, 3, 3. Yeah, I think that should just about do it. And let's just zoom in here so we can see what's going on. While we're here, we'll just increase the quality of this. So if we go into find our Minecraft font, go to font size, make that 150 and switch this to Unicode. That gives us a much crisper, nicer looking font. And then we go back to our text. I think that is just a little bit too far off to this. We're aligned to the right, aren't we? Yeah. So make there, right. So set that to 0. By default, both of these are going to be disabled. So let's disable those. And then we can drag that into there. And that's our UI item slot set. So let's go into our prefabs folder and let's update that. Now, I probably shouldn't have deleted the toolbar script because we are actually going to need a toolbar script of sorts. But for now, let's recreate it, but using the new system. So now our toolbar script is going to have an array of UI item slots, which we're going to just call, we'll just call slots. And this wants to be public. We're gonna set these in the inspector. Set that to 1 and item slot. There we go. Now, so I tell a lie, we do actually have a little bit more to add to item stack. So we're just gonna stick a constructor in there, which is gonna take in a byte for the ID and a int for the amount. And all it's going to do is set those values. So let's go back to our toolbar and do a little test. We'll create a new item stack. We will give it, I don't know, whatever block 3 is, and 14 of those. So this creates an item stack of whatever I've got at block 3. I really can't remember what is block ID 3, but whatever that block is, and it's 14 of them. And then now we've come to the first, as I mentioned, we'd add more to these as we go along if we needed them. We've come across the first one that we do need one. So we're going to need another constructor in here, public item slot, and this one will take in a UI item slot again, but it will also take in an item stack. So we're just going to copy all of this, but instead of setting this to null, it's going to set it to stack. And then if we go back to our toolbar, we've got our stack here. We're going to create a new item slot. It's going to take in our slots, which is going to be 0 because we've only got 1. And it's going to take in our stack. And that should take care of everything. So let's run that and see what happens. Grass blocks. Grass blocks are number 3. So now you can see it's added our number and it's added our icon, which is exactly what we wanted. Who'd have thought it would work first time on this channel of all channels. So let's add a few more item slots. And now I've added these slots back. Let's stick them in our toolbar array. And now we'll go into our toolbar and we'll swap this, we'll do a little for loop. So we'll do for each, this is just for testing purposes, for each UI item slot in S in slots. So for each one of these, I'm just going to do a quick index, int index equals 1. Remember, we don't, this is the index of the block, sorry, that wants to be a byte actually. This is the index of the block ID that we're going to use. We don't want it to be 0 because 0 is air blocks, and we can't use air blocks as blocks. Air blocks if we want an air block, we destroy a block. We don't create an air block, we destroy a physical block. So we start at 1, and then we're going to loop through each item slot, and then we're just going to do the same thing, only this is going to equal index -1, because that does want to start at 0. This is just going to equal index, and then the amounts we're just going to do random.range, and we'll go from 2 completely random numbers to 65. Integers exclude the top number, so it will go from 2 to 64. So the top number, when you do a random range of integers, the top number is exclusive, which means it will never be 65. It only goes up to 64. I think when you do floats, it's inclusive. So little quirk of the system there. Actually, this doesn't want to be slots, sorry. This wants to be S. So now, if we run it, we should get the first 9 blocks that we've got and some random amounts. And instead, we've got entirely bedrock, and the reason for that is because I didn't increment our index. So let's just try that again. There we go. So we've got amounts, and we have icons, and we have proper item management behind the scenes. So let's just quickly get our toolbar working again. So I'm not going to go over this selection code again because we did this in the toolbar menu. So if you, like me, deleted the toolbar script when you really didn't need to because I told you to, so I'm sorry about that, then just go back to the toolbar script or undelete the script, whatever. Basically, it's just the bit for selecting which item slot we're currently looking at in the toolbar. I'm just going to recode that, but I'm not going to show you that because we've done it already. So I'll see you in a second. Okay, so I've put the code back for the selection. Is mainly these two here. We need the rect transform for our highlight rectangle thing, and we need a slot index. And then down here, this is the code we had in our update. As you can see, there's a few errors. So I've left them there so that I can fix them for, like, you can see what we have to do to change that. So if you remember, item slots previously referred to the, just go back in a unit, previously referred to these, the actual the actual position in the array. That's no longer what item slot means. So if we just change this to slots, that fixes that problem. We also need a reference to our player. Sorry, I forgot about that. And now in here, we need to change this because we're no longer working with the same class behind the scenes. So instead of slot index icon, we need, what do we need? Slot icon is what we've called it. So if we go back to toolbar, that wants to be slot icon. And then the item slot.stack.id. I understand that's quite a lengthy procedure to get there. So if we go back into Unity now, we want to re-enable our highlight thing, and we want to drag it into here. And then also we need our player in there, and that should get our scrolling working again. So our scrolling's working again. And as you can see, it is pulling the correct block once more. So we're back to where we started at the start of the tutorial. So let's go ahead and work on some more. If we go back into our UI item slot and we go down to our item slot, we're going to add a few functions in here. So we're not going to edit our item stack directly. The way we're going to handle the item stack is we're going to have some functions that will do it for us. And then what that allows us to do is ensure that things are handled properly. The first thing we're going to do is a public void, no, let's do public int, and we're just going to call this take. And it's going to take in an int. We're just going to call that amped. So what this is going to do is we're going to try and take an amount from this. The reason we're not just going to edit the integer value, and the reason we're not just passing in an amount and taking that amount away, is because we don't know if we're going to have enough. So what this does is it allows us to say if amped is greater than stack.amount. So if we're asking for more than this item slot is currently holding, then we're going to return stack.amount, and then we're going to empty slot because there's nothing in it. Sorry, the way we need to do this is we need to create a new int because we can't empty the slot before we return the amount, and we can't return the amount and then empty the slot. So we create a new int. We'll just call it underscore amount equals stack.amount. Then we empty the slot, which gets rid of this stack. So that's why we need to do it this way, because we can, once we've emptied the slot, we can no longer access this stack because it will be null. And then we return amount. Else, if amount is less than stack.amount, stack.amount minus equals amount, return amount. And then the final condition we're going to look at is, we've got if amount is more than, we've got if amount is less than. The only condition left is if amount is equal to. So if it's equal to, once again, we're going to empty slot, and then we're going to return the amount. So we're returning the amount that was asked for, and we are emptying the slot because the amount that was asked for is the amount that was in the slot. So now if we go back to our toolbar, if we go back to our player.world and we go down to our place block, we're just going to make a few changes in here. Just remember where I put the code for this. Here we go, place block. The way we're going to handle this is we're going to do away with our selected block index. And we're going to have a public, well, first off, we're going to have a toolbar reference. And we're going to use that to access what we need. So in our toolbar, this is public. And this will, we're going to have to make this public as well. So if we go back to our, where we want to be using that there, down here, what we're going to do is we're going to say toolbar dot slots toolbar dot slot index for the index dot item slot dot stack dot id. So once again, this gets us back to sort of where we were before we started messing with the code a second ago. But what we're going to do this time is we're going to check first that the slot that we are looking at actually has anything in it. So we'll enclose those in brackets. And we're going to do another check. We'll just copy this. So if toolbar dot has item, so we're only going to be doing this if there is an item in there. So if it has an item, we do that. And then we want to make sure we increment our values. So item slot dot take 1. Oh yeah, we no longer need this line of code because we are getting our selected block directly from the script. And if we go back in here, we just want to set our toolbar in our player reference. And if we run that, we should have so it is actually working in terms of maintaining the value, but we're not updating our amount for some reason. So let's just check why that is. And why that is because we're only actually updating the slot when we empty it, and obviously we're not always going to be emptying it. So update UI item slot dot update slot. And now if you look, you can see the amount is going down and is vanishing when we use them all up. And now that that slot is empty, we're not actually putting anything down. So that part's working. Now this video is run very long, so I mean, I'm trying to keep these things palatable. So this is now going to be a 2-part video. I'm going to stop this part here, and in the next video we'll do our drag and drop handling. If you're a bit impatient and you can't wait for that video, I did do a video on drag and drop handling that shouldn't be too difficult to apply to this. So we're going to stop this one here. I will possibly maybe get the part 2 up before next week. I'll have to see how time pans out. I won't keep you waiting too long for part 2. But I'm going to end this one here and we will carry on the next video. Bye-bye for now.